Welcome to Bandit's Keep. I'm Daniel. Today I want to talk a little bit about exploration in our games. This kind of comes about because I was watching a bunch of random YouTube videos, as I do, and I came across one. It was called something like Why I Play Old Games or something, and they kind of mentioned the idea that in these older style games there's a lot of exploration. I can't remember the exact video, and I kind of clicked off of it because they started ranting about artwork and stuff. But anyways, in any case, we're here now. And I thought, one thing I've been enjoying in my now almost 2-year-long solo game is the kind of the exploration, almost board gamey exploration that I do. But also I was thinking about my now almost 3-year-long OD&D campaign and how that campaign features a lot of exploration. Now, when we think about exploration, we got to kind of break down what it is, I think. This is going to be important moving forward in this because you hear these terms, these pillars, right? The social, the combat, and the exploration. But is that even a thing in my game? And what does exploration mean? What is exploration? When I think of exploration, I like to compare it to, although these things are related, discovery. That is to say that in a game of exploration, you are discovering things, of course, but you're doing it by the freedom to look around, to see what catches your eye, and to just go with what's there. Whereas discovery happens in even more linear campaigns, but that discovery is generally something that's planned out, right? We know that this is going to happen, this is going to happen. And let's not even think about full-on linear story path campaigns. Let's just think about two types of adventures, event-based and location-based. So I would posit that the location-based adventure is definitely more of an exploration than the event-based. Yes, there's exploration in event-based games, and some of the exploration could be social, but basically in an event-based game, or adventure, let me just take a step back for a second because maybe I'm talking event-based and location-based, and you might not even have an idea what that is. So it's all kinds of definitions today. Event-based adventures are exactly that. A simple example would be you're in town for a festival. Things are going to happen, right? The GM already knows at 1 o'clock this is going to happen, at 5 o'clock this is going to happen. And as these things happen, they create adventure or mystery or something for the player characters to get involved in. The plot's moving forward. The player characters are going to be involved. It's kind of like a ticking clock, but not exactly because ticking clocks are something else. But the idea being that if you set up an adventure and your premise is the players are in town for such and such a festival, during the festival, let's say it's the Macy's parade because that's coming up. The Santa Claus is kidnapped 2 days before, and the players have to find the Santa Claus before, It's very funny. But is that a movie? But anyways, they got to find the Santa Claus before the parade or else it's all ruined. And that would be event-based, right? Whereas a location-based adventure is you're going to New York City for Thanksgiving weekend. Figure it out, right? And everywhere you go, there could potentially be adventure. Maybe you go into different places and meet different people and different ideas come up, but there's nothing that's like propelling the story forward per se. This is being very surface level, but that's kind of the idea. The same is true in your campaign. A more discovery-based, I'll call it, for lack of a better word, I'm sure there's a better way to say this, is you're discovering things. Like you discover the big bad has done this thing. You discover that you need to destroy the ring in order to destroy them. You discover that the ring can only be destroyed at this place. You discover those, right? But it's still linear. Where exploration, the discovery is, I wonder what's on the other side of that mountain. I wonder what happens if we go this way. Who do we run into on the road? What adventures can come from that? And that is the exploration that I'm talking about. So it's not so much that it's a pillar that should be included. It's kind of a different way of thinking. When you're creating an exploration-based campaign, this is also often referred to as a sandbox, in the sense that you're out there doing stuff. You could sandbox linear adventures too. Again, we get really confusing here, but that's kind of what you're thinking of. So when I look at let's scroll back. When I look at my solo game, the game is all about these treasure maps that are placed in the wilderness, and parties are going to these locations to get the treasure, and what's there, they don't know. So they discover it, right? But they explore these dungeons and stuff to find what's there. They explore the wilderness to find the treasure maps in the earlier part of the campaign. And that's effectively the basis of the thing. Now, when we look at my in-person campaign, there's a lot more depth than that because I'm not playing surface level board game. I'm digging deep into it. So what's the exploration in a game with lots of players and lots of, for lack of a better word, plots? How do we get our players to explore? This right here is really one of the most common questions and one of the most difficult ones to answer because I don't have your players in front of me. The ideal way to get your players to explore is to present things that their characters and them as players will be interested in exploring. That is, know your audience, right? That's key. But if you're just starting with a new group or they're new characters and you don't know, a key way to do this is to hint at the unknown in a way that's appealing and make sure there's lots of different things going on. One thing we can't do in exploration-based campaigns is worry about the idea the players have to deal with everything. So you could start off a exploration-based campaign in a town, in a tavern, right, if you want, but you've got to kind of premise the thing by saying, hey, you've come to this frontier town because beyond these dark woods are ancient ruins, and some people have come back with gold, with treasure, with magic, with secrets, and you're interested in that. You're adventurers, so make characters that are interested in that, right? And then this right away gives them a reason to do it. But even then, okay, we're in a town, there's woods. What do? We just randomly hex crawl? You could do that, and some groups might love that. But I'm going to say that's not necessarily the best advice to give to a group that isn't already involved in exploration. I think the better idea is to give, you've probably heard this before, rumors, hints, even a quest giver. Even in the beginning, having somebody say, hey, they come to the town, somebody gets there and they say, I had hired a couple of people to go out and investigate this area. They never came back. Can you follow up for me? Or my stuff was supposed to, the tavern owner is like, we're running low on supplies because the supply caravan never made it. Could you go look for it? And if you do, then you can stay at the tavern, the inn above the tavern for free for a month or something if you solve this problem, right? Now we're basically giving a quest to the player characters. And when they go off to figure out what happened to the caravan, they find hints and clues that send them into other areas. And these things can have multitudes of connecting points that all lead to different areas, right? Maybe the bandits took the caravan, and it's as simple as that. But maybe when they're on the road heading up, they run into a small group of goblins that they have a combat with. Goblins flee off into the woods and they think, well, goblins might rob a caravan. So now they're following the goblins, right? And they're exploring to see what happened here. Maybe they encounter the goblins in a small village that's been run down by human settlers, and the goblins are like, well, these bandits keep stealing our stuff, and that's why we were kind of just trying to get something for ourselves. So now working with the goblins, what's going on? What were they doing here? And we can basically build and roll into this whole thing, and it all comes down to different ideas happening all at once, because that's the way the world is, right? I hate to ever talk about realism in games, but if you show up at a place, let's say that you go to a convention and you don't know anybody and you're, somewhat friendly, you'll meet lots of interesting people and you'll hear lots of stories and you'll hear what they did there the year before, what they're doing this year. You'll hear where they came from, restaurants they've gone to. All these things are modern day equivalents to what the players can figure out when they're exploring. So when they go into an area, have lots of stuff for them to explore. Too much stuff for them to explore. Let it be rich, but make sure some stuff just feels very obviously appealing in the beginning. This is important because what we can get if we go the other way is an overwhelmed group. If you start off your campaign with the players having very little connections and they're just in this new town and you give them a job board with 20 jobs on it, it's going to be very difficult for them to decide what to do. What we want to do is give them a handful of things that they can pick from. And from each of those things, it can branch off into more things. That is to say, let's say there's 3 options. One is there's a job board and somebody's posted something up that they want something done. One is that they find a guy down on his luck, and let's say if they help him, the person offers to share their treasure map with them. And maybe one thing is the tavern owner wants to send them on a quest. So you've got 3 options that they can potentially run into depending on who they interact with, where they go, and what they're interested in. If the group immediately goes to the job board and takes the job, fine. The guy with the treasure map might still be around, but probably not. They're down on their luck. They're going to find somebody else, right? If the tavern keep doesn't hire them, they might hire somebody else or they might not. And maybe when they go back to the tavern, there's no food. That opens up more interesting stuff, right? The tavern keep can't take any of their money that they just got from the adventure because they got nothing to sell them. And this can all become part of the world. It should be moving. And one of the tricks here is to present something kind of interesting with everybody they meet to a certain extent, not every person in a tavern, but make sure that things only start to really affect the world that you either, one, planned ahead of time, like you have this major thing happening, or that they start to get involved in and then leave, because players will do that a lot. And that's how they can make the world feel really alive. If they meet a random person who offers them a job and they don't take it, and then 3 months later something happens because of that, they're not going to remember that it's because they didn't take the job. But if they say, hey, I'm going to do this and I'll be back, and then they don't come back, and then that person's missing, because they don't come back when they're supposed to, they will remember that because they'll be like, oh, we got to go get that guy, and they don't, and now the guy's gone. Well, now they know the world's moving, right? We want the world to move, but we don't want to feel like we're punishing the players or give them too much to deal with all at once. So I'm going to kind of follow this. My next little section here is going to be just some simple kind of tips that you can use to keep the exploration going once you get it started. How to explore. My basic advice here is to think of, and I feel like there was a video that I watched like a long time ago where they said something like the world is a dungeon. So if you know that video, put it below, because it was a pretty good one if I remember right. But the idea was that, I think it might have been Dire Den. Check Dire Den out. They're pretty cool. Anyways, the point there was that you can think of everything like a dungeon. And I think in this case, you want to. If you think of an old school dungeon, a mega dungeon as it would be, one of the things that sometimes baffles people is the idea that when they brought the thief on, that you could try to pick a lock and fail. And then you can't do it again until you level up. And people would be worried about that. Why? There's all kinds of house rules or whatever. But when you come back to the original point of the game, it kind of makes sense. You're traveling through this dungeon. You try to go this way. It's blocked. Okay? You cannot go that way. So you go a different way. You do adventures. You move on. You come back again. Now you can try again. Or you leave that dungeon. And maybe 2 months later, you go, remember that door we couldn't open? What do you think was behind there? Right? And you go back to it. The idea of putting enticing things that the player characters cannot solve in their way makes them want to come back. And here's the thing. You've got to make sure that's clear. So many people run structures like 5-room dungeons where it's like, it's a one and done. It doesn't matter if it's campaign. You go here, you do your thing. You go here, you do your thing. You've got to make sure that things that have happened in the past, they walk past there again, that they have a reason to go back. Give them a reason to go to that dungeon again. Let them get to find a rumor or something. There's supposed to be a 3rd level of that dungeon. Really? We only went down 2 levels. I wonder if that door leads to a stairway, right? Something like that. Keep things active. Keep more information coming in. And after a while, players will just remember to do it. Again, you got to kind of get them used to it. My players will often mention something. They'll be like, oh, the island with that temple. And I'll be like, oh yeah, the island with the temple, going through my notes, because they'll remember it. They'll remember, oh yeah, there was a thing there that we couldn't do. And they go back to it. And that's what we want. We want the world to be a place that the players cannot solve everything, but there's enough enticing things that they will want to go back. So backtracking is key. Involve that in the game. Make it so they cannot get through certain areas. And you can make that very clear. And if you need to with your group, at first, don't feel bad about metagaming and just literally telling them, you just can't get through this door. You're not high enough level, or you don't have the right skills, or you don't have the right tools. And then if they find it interesting enough, they'll go get the tools. Now, you don't want to make every path like this. And this is important because I have played in adventures, or read adventures more than I've played in, where it's like the players come to this thing. Now they have to go get 12 guys to excavate it. This takes a week. Okay, they're going to need this. And every step of the way, they've got to keep leaving the dungeon and getting something. That's just aggravating. Eventually, the players will just be like, we're not going to go back to this dungeon. It's boring. The whole game is about moving rocks, right? We don't want that. What we want is enough interesting stuff that they might want to come back to. So an example would be they go to a town and there's a festival going on, but they're only going to the town to pick something up. And they're like, well, the festival is for 10 days and it's on day 2 of the festival. And they're like, well, you know what? After we do this quick thing we're going to do with this item we're picking up in the town, let's come back and see what this festival's about. this is what we do, right? It makes them come back to the festival, makes them not come back, right? If they don't go to the festival, maybe later on they hear something about it, right? And this is it. You just keep the world interesting enough that they'll want to go back. And eventually they will. I probably should have mentioned this first. I often do that. I have it in the mind and I don't do it when I start talking about dungeons. You know, when you in good dungeon design is all about, and this is why I don't love the 5-room dungeons and stuff, and good dungeon design to me is all about choice. Choice and exploration, obviously. And when you have a dungeon where the players cannot necessarily cover every bit of ground, when you have a dungeon that has multiple entrances, when you have a dungeon that has lots of choices, branching paths of where they can go, sometimes blocking them off if they choose one, they can't go back, right? It's like, here we are at a precipice. If we go this way, we know we can never go back, or it's unlikely, right? Maybe there's a portal that's going to close down, or maybe the portal gets destroyed once they step through it. You add these things to your dungeon so that the players need to make choices. Multiple ways in, multiple ways out, paths that where they have to choose, but also circles that go back together, ways to avoid things. They can't get through this door, sure, but if they go 5 rooms over and go up and go over here, they can get to the other side of the dungeon. They're not stopped by that door. They just don't have what's in that room, right? This is what we want for our dungeon. Lots and lots of choice. And the same is true for the world. When they step out in the wilderness, they can go anywhere. Do they want to go through the haunted forest? Do they want to go the safe roads? Do they want to take a shortcut through the desert? Do they want to go through the mountain range where there's potential to find hidden, structures that were there from an ancient war? And sometimes these structures have magic weapons in them. And they've heard these rumors in town. But of course, in the mountains is way more chance of an encounter. That's where dragons live. So do we want to go there? That's a choice the players can make. Let's find out if there really are dragons in the mountain. Let's explore. So as I said at the beginning, to me, the game is about exploration. And if you do a more open world, sandboxy kind, that's cool. If you do it in more of a discovery way, that's also fine. All different ways to play are fun. But I find every week sitting down and throwing more threads out there at the players, watching them scribble down notes frantically, thinking about what they want to do, making plans for their characters is the most satisfying way for me to run the game. Let me know how you like to run the game. Go ahead and put a comment below. I always like to talk in the comments and everything. Been getting a little bit behind the last few weeks, but I'm catching back up. Holidays are here. And I hope if you celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday that you enjoy the time with your friends and family, or just eating a lot of food. And if you don't celebrate it, well, eat some food anyways. Why not? It's always good for you. Not those iron rations, though. Jump in the description below. You'll find a link to my Discord server. You want to join the conversation. Lots of great people over there talking about gaming. And you can also support the channel if you'd like via Patreon. You'll find a link to that as well. I'll talk to you soon.